Okay. Good evening, councillors. Welcome to this special council meeting. The main agenda is going to be DfI roads, but I have a few bits of housekeeping to do prior to the meeting, commencing in full. So before I go to apologies, I'm going to pass on congratulations to Councillor Mark Ovens and his wife Mairead, who were safely delivered this afternoon of a baby girl. So that's something else. I'd also like to welcome my party colleague Rosemary Barton back to the chamber. I'm glad to see you back, Rosemary, working with you. And on that there, I'm going to go to Councillor Victor Warrington. Victor, if you could make the necessary proposals to get Rosemary back to work as quick as possible.
Thank you, Chair. Well, we'll get her working ASAP. Just to get this rubber stamped, Rosemary will be taking over all the committees that Deanna was on, with the exception of she'll be taking R&C, which I'd passed to Roy. She'll be taking that back, and the only one she won't be taking on is the visitor experience development plan delivery. That'll be remaining with Councillor Crawford. So that's it. And again, from our group, and certainly congratulations to Mark. That'll put a bit of manners on him now for a few nights. Thank you.
Thank you, Victor. So I'm going to go to apologies. Tommy, are you going to do the necessary? I don't see. Is Debbie online?
I am online. Yeah.
Oh, sorry, Debbie. Go on ahead, please.
Yeah. No, thank you, and congratulations to Mark and also to Rosemary too. The apologies are Padrigine Kelly, Anne-Marie Fitzgerald, Marty McColgan, Patrick Withers, John Feely, and Nolene Hayes as well.
Okay, thank you. Next week, we'll go back to you, Victor.
Yeah, well, the only apology I have obviously is Mark, and I think the remaining councillors are either joining us online or are running late. And again, I forgot to mention congratulations to Rosemary for being back in the middle of it all.
Thank you, Victor. Next, I'll go to Councillor Paul Robinson.
Councillor Rogan and Councillor Hawkes. Councillor Thompson, I think, is online.
He is indeed, yeah. Okay, thank you, Paul. Eddie, are you acting for the, or is Stephen online? I am. Councillor Eddie Roof for the Alliance Party.
Thanks. I'm trying to get a hold of him. I'm not sure actually if he is online, but if not, I'll send his apologies.
Okay.
Not online.
Okay. I'm looking for the SDLP. Garvin, I see your hand up there. Go ahead, please.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just apologies for Councillor Gannon and Councillor McGrath, please. Okay,
thank you. And Josephine, I can see you, so you're here. So I'll accept that. So next item on the agenda is declarations of interest. And I'll start the ball rolling. My son-in-law is a subcontractor who does work for the DfI roads. And my nephew also does subcontracts in. So that's that bit covered. For me, I'm not seeing anybody else indicating. So next we have in the chamber tonight Brian Stewart and Connor Granger, who are the two section engineers, and we also have Daniel Healy online. So I'm going to hand over to DfI Roads to make their presentation, and then whatever happens after that.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. Firstly, let me apologise for not being able to attend in person this evening, and I'd like to thank you for agreeing to allow me to present remotely. I appreciate your understanding. I also appreciated the opportunity earlier this year to meet with some of the councillors to discuss how we can work together more effectively to improve the service that DfI Roads provides to you and your constituents. I'm delighted this evening to be able to present DfI Roads' annual report to Council and highlight some of the challenges and successes we've had over the last year. This is the third time I've had the opportunity to address this meeting, and some of the issues that I touch on this afternoon will be familiar to many of you who have heard my previous presentations. I always think it's useful to emphasise the main challenge we face in DfI when seeking to improve or even maintain our roads infrastructure, and that's funding. While there are a number of other contributory factors that affect the condition of our roads assets, the ability to effectively manage our infrastructure is most impacted by the funding we receive. This year's capital funding for structural maintenance is around £89 million. Capital funding allows the department to complete larger scale resurfacing schemes to significantly prolong the lifespan of our roads. While this level of investment is welcome, it's not near the £190 million per year maintenance requirement adjusted for inflation recommended by the 2018 Barton Report on road maintenance. While this level of funding is perhaps not what we in the department would hope for, the return of the Assembly means that there will be opportunities to bid for additional monies within the periodic monitoring rounds. This is a welcome change from last year, and I'd like to assure councillors that we in Western Division, much as we have done in previous years, will be bidding strongly for as much in-year funding as possible, which will be translated directly into improvements in our local roads infrastructure. I can confirm that the department will continue to implement our limited service policy across the maintenance activities, which means only the most severe defects are repaired. I know I've highlighted the effect this has on the quality of our roads and future maintenance burden that this may leave the department, but I would stress that my teams are doing all they can to ensure that the network is managed in the most efficient and effective manner possible. The report itself details an extensive list of maintenance, network development, active travel, street lighting structure schemes, along with network planning statistics completed for the year 23-24 and programmed for the current year. I'm not going to go through them all in detail, but I will give a brief overview of the scale of the work that we've completed. In 23-24 and extending into this year, our major projects, you'll be aware of the news issued by the Infrastructure Minister earlier this month to proceed with the construction of the A5 Western Transport Corridor, which will have a significant safety and traffic benefit for the Fermanagh and Omagh Council area. This would allow construction to commence in 2025 if there are no further legal challenges. The Enniskillen bypass is also progressing, with funding confirmed from the Executive, meaning that it can proceed to construction next year as originally planned. Tendering is currently underway for this project. From a maintenance point of view, last year, we completed 75 kilometres of roads resurfaced and 81 lane kilometres of surface dressing. We also completed 2.25 kilometres of footways resurfaced and 59 drainage schemes, along with the clearing out of 34,500 road gullies, which equates to around 95% of the 35,139 that we have in the Fermanagh and Omagh area to ensure that our roads remain in a safe and passable condition. We also cut over 7,400 kilometres of verges and repaired over 12,800 priority defects. 84% of those repaired within the required timeframes from our maintenance policy. There was 66 winter call-outs, salting 720 kilometres of roads and over 1,200 notifications to excavate within the highway. My network development section, which deals with traffic management, road safety improvements and street lighting, completed schemes worth more than £435,000, including upgrading a number of traffic management systems, the Great Northern Road carriageway widening on the western side near Home Base Junction to increase capacity, 10 traffic calming schemes, and we introduced a number of speed restrictions, warning signs, parking restrictions and bays. Our active travel schemes were almost £500,000 with 2 shared footways on the Dublin and Cookstown roads in Omagh, as well as 3 further schemes. Our street lighting completed 12 schemes to the value of 2.2 million, and our structures invested over £500,000 in 23 schemes, varying from parapet repairs to masonry arch repairs, with the most significant or the most notable is the completion of the retaining wall in Kesh. There was also £105,000 spent on 8 vehicle restraint repairs and upgrades. Our network planning teams processed 682 planning consultations and adopted 16 private streets into the public road network. With regards to the local development plan, the council adopted the local development plan on the 16th of March, and the plan strategy became effective from that date. The consultation on the local policies plan is expected to start probably next year. In the current year, and I appreciate with the timing of the presentation, a lot of this work is already completed. We plan to complete 22 kilometres of roads for resurfacing and that's down obviously on last year, and that reflects the department's restricted budget for the current year. We've completed 152 lane kilometres of roads resurface dressed and 2.58 kilometres of footway resurfacing. We've also planned to carry out a responsive set of drainage improvement projects costing almost £500,000 and continue to carry out one gully cleansing of all gullies within the district and 2 grass cuts across the season. Defects will continue to be repaired in accordance with the department's limited service policy, and that's generally speaking all defects over 50 millimetres should be repaired, and all defects over 20 millimetres or around 20 millimetres and over on trunk roads should be repaired. The plan is to deliver a normal winter service salting schedule. My network development teams are also engaged with a number of schemes this year, including a number of signal upgrades similar to last year and pedestrian crossings, the design of sightline improvements and carriageway realignments, with the most significant being the Dublin Road, Derrychara Road and Enniskillen traffic signal and junction upgrade, and the extension of the left turn lane to the Great Northern Road. There are also 5 traffic calming schemes being brought forward and numerous changes to speed limits, weight restrictions and disabled parking bays planned. Our active travel schemes are worth, again, over £500,000 in the area, and that's in pedestrian improvement measures in the Moyle Road, Seskinore, and a shared footway in Irvinstown, on the Irvinstown Road in Enniskillen. There are also 9 schemes for street lighting, and that's down on the previous year again due to the reduction in that budget. Our structures plan to spend over £300,000 on the upkeep of our road structures and £25,000 on a number of vehicle restraint system upgrades. That completes my brief rundown, and I appreciate it was a whistle-stop tour, so I'll be happy to expand on any of the information I've just quickly mentioned. I'd like to thank members for the correspondence the department has received over the past year. I appreciate that all requests to the department come from a wish to improve the lives of local people and their communities, even if it's just to repair a pothole outside their house. My team and I share this aspiration. However, the service we provide is dictated by the resources available, and the sad truth is that infrastructure, along with many other public services, are operating in a challenging funding environment. That said, I will continue to make the strongest case possible for additional funding to be allocated to Reston Division and ensure that we are in a position to put that funding to work on our roads, should it be through an increased annual funding or in-year allocations. Thank you. And I'm happy to take any questions or cover anything that the council would like me to touch on.
Thank you. Thank you for reminding me. Daniel, I see there in item 4, we have three sort of specific questions that were put. I know you kind of covered them there, but do you want to specifically address them first before I open the floor?
Yeah, I don't have it in front of me. I do recall that one was grass cutting.
So one's grass cutting, one's on the traffic signs and provision of part-time 20 miles per hour speed limits, and the third one is in relation to unadopted estates in the district.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I'm happy to cover those. I'm aware of a number of representations this year that we had from councillors and council members with regards to starting the grass cutting earlier. Recently, I responded to a request along those lines from the council officials, and I can confirm that we're looking to engage additional resources for the coming year to ensure that the grass cut is more quickly carried out, and we're also going to start as early as we possibly can, starting in the area requested by councillors. What I would say is, and I think it's probably well known, that we only have the funding to complete 2 cuts for the grass verges, and that means we need to time the grass cuts in such a way to ensure that we manage to cut the grass, have it cut and down for a significant period before we carry out a cut again. And that's down to the assessment of the local engineers to assess that. And the reason I mention that is because if we cut too early and the grass growing season hasn't particularly started, then by the time we carry out the second cut, the grass has got excessively long, causing potential safety hazards. And then conversely, if we cut twice too early, then when we come to the end of the season, the grass again could be too long and we're in trouble with potential safety hazards. So it's a difficult balance to achieve. And what I would say is it also takes around 2 months to complete a full cut of the over 7,000 kilometres of roadside verges and side splays and sight lines. So by the time we've carried out our first cut, 2 months nearly has passed from where we started. So the grass is getting to a significant length again. So there's a balance to be cut there. But as I say, we're looking to engage additional resources and also to start a little bit earlier at the request of the councillors. With regards to the 20-mile-per-hour zones, as you know, there were over 215 schools completed with the 20-mile-per-hour zones at schools. And the draft review report was submitted to the Minister recently. With the Minister, I believe he's almost finished considering it, and the findings of the review will be made public, and the decision on future rollouts will be made. So my understanding at this stage is that the review found that the 20-mile-per-hour signs at schools was reasonably successful. It's certainly very popular with a lot of the councils and a lot of the schools. So I would imagine that there will be a further rollout. With regards to the signs at schools, as part of the review of the 20-mile-per-hour rollout, the Road Safety at Schools Road Service Procedure and Policy Guide is due to be redrafted, and that will consider the inclusion of new warning signs for preschools and nurseries to be included as part of the standard signage for schools in Northern Ireland. At the minute, the traffic signs manual requires a name or a information plate to be issued, and that doesn't cover preschools and nurseries. So there is work in the background being done to see if that will be brought forward. And finally, the unadopted roads and developments. Within Fermanagh and Omagh District Council, there's a number of unadopted estates, and some of those have been on the unadopted list for quite some time. Within the department, we have a way of prioritising those particular adopted sites, and it's set out in priority 1, which are development sites which have 80% occupancy but remain unadopted for more than 5 years. So they would be priority 1 sites, and they would be the ones that we would like to address as soon as we can. The problem with the sites in that list is that a lot of them, the developers have gone out of business, and the cost of the bond that remains is not sufficient to carry out the works to bring the infrastructure to an adoptable standard. So unfortunately, the department isn't funded at the moment to bridge the gap between the bond and the value of the work necessary to bring them up to an adoptable standard. And the legislation places that burden on the homeowners. And I appreciate that that might not be seen as particularly fair, but that's the way the legislation is at the moment. And that would require a legislation change to remove that burden from the homeowners to, for example, a government department. Now, following the 2012 inquiry into unadopted streets and roads, there was a decision made by the minister at the time to allocate a small amount of money to bringing some of those backlog of developments up to standard. But we're operating in a very different environment at the moment, and the limited funds that the department have are generally directed towards safety-related projects and safety-related maintenance works, which means that it becomes more difficult to justify allocating additional resources to addressing the backlog unless there's a specific safety issue with regards to them. I veered off slightly there. There are two other priorities in the list of backlog of unadopted sites. That's priority 2 sites, which are sites that have 80% occupancy but remain unadopted for the last 3 to 5 years, and priority 1 sites, which have 80% occupancy but remain unadopted for less than 3 years. Within the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area, there are 59 extent or 94 bonded extents in 59 developments which sit within the priority 1 category. That's the 80% occupancy but more than 5 years old. There are 5 bonded extents in 5 developments which have 80% occupancy but are unadopted between 3 and 5 years. And there is only 1 priority 3 with bonded extent with 80% occupancy but remain unadopted for less than 3 years. So you can see that the vast majority of the unadopted backlog within the Fermanagh and Omagh District Council area are confined to those older developments, some of them up to 20 years old or older, where just the value of the bond at the time wasn't sufficient to carry out the works. And obviously that's become worse with the construction inflation over time. So I would agree with some of the members that have been in contact with the department that, you know, a focus needs to be on those to get them done. But unfortunately, at this stage, neither ourselves nor Northern Ireland Water are funded to address that backlog. We have done a number of things to try and reduce the backlog over the last number of years, particularly since the 2012 public inquiry, and that included 10 recommendations from that inquiry, 6 of which were related to DfI roads, which were all implemented following the completion of the inquiry and the recommendations. Within the last year, in the 1st of January in 2023, the industry were informed that bond calculation rates were being raised to reflect increases in construction inflation. That means the rates would be adjusted annually with the price fluctuation factor used for the department's minor improvement works contracts. Prior to this, the bond calculation rates had not been changed since 2008, and that obviously resulted in an increased risk of the bond not being sufficient to cover the costs of bringing the infrastructure up to an adoptable standard. So certainly since 2023, we've got a much better or a much lower risk of sites becoming part of the unadopted backlog. I would also say that we are working through a number of the other backlog sites, and there are a number of enforcements being carried out during the current year using the bonds of existing older sites to carry out works.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. So now I'm going to open the floor. I'm going to ask councillors if you can keep it more open instead of just going completely to specific things to your area. We have had DEA meetings, and that should have been the forum for to do that. So if you can keep it more broad and open, but obviously that may be difficult, but I will try and referee it. Thank you. So first of all, I'm going to Councillor Thomas O'Reilly.
Thanks, Chair. And can I then respond to that opening remark, John, that the DEA meetings have been less than helpful, and this is something that I have flagged up on a number of occasions. So we need to get into a better situation to be able to get a better result for everybody out of the DEA meetings. For one, to be able to maybe leave a less burdensome night when we have opportunity on a face-to-face basis to meet with road service. That said, Chair, I'll do my very best to cooperate. The report, there is obviously some very welcome news in the report, the A5, the Southern Bypass, all big projects which we have been hanging out for quite some time, and it's good to see that those are on the cusp of coming to fruition, and hopefully that remains the case. It'll be very welcome for all our residents. Can I take it to something that didn't seem to come up, or maybe I missed it somewhere along the line, was the road marking, Chair. Certainly a lot of areas within our council district, the road markings are non-existent or that faded, that they are very difficult to see. Examples are, I suppose, the mini roundabouts and things like that. Some I do note, and I'm pleased to acknowledge that some road marking in the recent weeks has taken place within the council area, which has been a big help. There's still a lot more to be done, Chair, and certainly one of the noticeable places was unfortunately the scene of an accident not so very long ago. A fatality there on the Crum Road from Lisnaskea towards Newton Butler, and just the markings there that were to be put on at that junction. It was surface dressed some time ago, and the road markings never upgraded. And coincidentally, a week after the accident, the road markings were put on. So, Chair, and they were extensively lobbied for. And that junction was one of two junctions, Chair, that when you come from the minor road on to the slightly more major road, there is a road directly opposite you, and unless you see the road markings and see the give way and stop signs very clearly, you can be out across that road. And the other site for that is Drumralla, which is a road just on the Cavan Road, the first road on the left outside of Newton Butler, lobbied on as well, but has yet to have any work there on sightlines or anything else done. The other one, Chair, that I want to pick up on is the removal of lights from the back of houses along housing estates and so forth, leaving very, very dark estates, and the dangers in them for all age groups, but particularly old people at the back of their houses. Now, I appreciate this was something that was 3 years ago, 4 years ago, 5 years ago, and it was passed, but it is, once it's been implemented, something that is being brought up more and more by people. The grass cutting, I suppose, is welcome, Daniel, that there is some nod to what councillors in this council area have been lobbying for an earlier start. But could I ask that wherever and you see it takes 2 months to do a cycle from start to finish, wherever that cycle is starting, it's certainly not in the Fermanagh council area. And I'm just wondering, when do we get our turn to have it start in the council area? I know there's no more May, and that's fair enough. But by the end of May, beginning of June, there is sightlines that are very, very dangerous. And I appreciate that obviously will be the same wherever the mow starts. But if it takes 2 months to get here, it is quite some time. So I'm just wondering, and I appreciate Daniel said that there's more resources being allocated. It'll be interesting to see, does that make a difference? But then on top of that, Chair, outside of the normal mow along the verges, what is the provision for sightline Pacific cases where you have sightlines that are, the grass is too high or the hedge is too wide or whatever the case may be? Is there a way that there is some provision that can be either taken out of the verge mowing to Pacific areas, or is that something that we're still waiting for? The adopted estates, Chair, is certainly something that I'm welcoming to see more emphasis on. And I'm just wondering that when you have a potential developer that is willing, that wasn't the original developer, that's willing to put money into a non-adopted estate and try to bring it up to standard. What is the coordination between DfI Roads and the sewerage people in Northern Ireland Water? How does that, because there seems to be, on the one hand, you deal with DfI Roads and things get done, and then you have the whole sewerage system that is completely a separate thing and can delay the thing then, despite the fact that the roads end of it is fixed. I'll leave it at that, Chair. Hopefully I kept fairly well.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, you did, Thomas. You've done your best there. Daniel, I'll hand over to you first. I'm sure you may want to defer to your engineers.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. With regards to road markings, I appreciate that in some areas the road markings have become worn, and I think that's a reflection of the limited budget we have for that particular function. I would also say that when we do have a budget for road markings, then we tend to try to concentrate on those areas that are safety related rather than things like parking bays and taxi bays and things like that, although I do appreciate that they also need done. And we also tend to focus on known areas of potential safety risk and our more highly trafficked roads. But I completely accept that there are lesser traffic roads that would definitely meet the criteria for us to replace the lines. One thing I would say is in the current year, there's been about, I know there's been a significant amount of money spent on the A5 following the allocation of additional funds for that particular road to try and improve safety on it. Last year, we went from Omagh to Ballygawley, replacing all the white lines, cat's eyes and signs. And this year we're going from Omagh northwards. So there's been quite a lot of work done on that, but I accept that there are a number of rural roads that require it. With regards to the point made at Crom, you're absolutely right. Following the surface dressing, the line should have been replaced, and the works order was given for that. It just wasn't, unfortunately, done, and tragically not before the accident that happened. We did have a plan within our network development section to improve the approach, one of the approaches to that particular junction. Following the accident, we've revised that to improve both approaches to that junction, to improve sight distances, sight lines, and signage. So there has been some movement, but tragically not in time to avert the terrible accident that happened recently. You mentioned that there was another one, Drumralla Road, Councillor O'Reilly. That's one I'm probably going to have to chase up for you because it's not one that I'm familiar with, unless one of the guys in the council chambers there is familiar with it.
Brian's indicating there.
Yeah. Daniel, that road's on the schedule to be completed later on as soon as the weather permits.
Okay. Thank you, Brian. The removal of lights in back alleys, you're right, Councillor O'Reilly, the recent, well, not recently, about 4 or 5 years ago, street lighting policy changed that if you have a lit access to the house, to the front of a house, then once the lighting at the back of the house reaches end of life, the department removed that lighting and it became policy. I'm not entirely sure the reason for the change, but obviously light pollution, restricted budgets, and having an access already to the front of the house is a big consideration for that. With regards to sight lines, with regards to our budgets, if there's a safety issue at a junction, then the money will be found to carry out the works. If we're notified of a safety issue with regards to sight lines and grass growing at junctions, then we'll send our contractors out to carry out that work. Safety is paramount. With regards to hedges, that's another issue, mainly because the vast majority of hedges that line our roads and junctions are not owned by the department, and it's the landowner's responsibility to carry out maintenance of those hedges to ensure sight lines are maintained. What I will say is if there are hedges that are causing a safety issue, the department notifies the landowner, if we can find out who the landowner is, to carry out the works. If the landowner fails to carry out the works, the department do have powers to carry out the works and then pursue the landowner. So there is a process that can be gone through if it's hedges causing sightline problems. With regards to developers bringing infrastructure up to standards and the liaison between DfI roads and NI water, they're two completely separate adoption processes under different articles, under different legislation. DfI worked to Article 32 of the Private Streets Order, and NI Water worked to Article 161 of the wastewater legislation. We generally don't adopt a site unless NI Water give the recommendation that they will adopt their infrastructure. And the reason for that is because we could adopt a site and immediately require NI Water to carry out works to complete their infrastructure, and that would be tearing up a recently completed road. So we tend to wait for them, although I will say that in some occasions that can result in lengthy extensions and for the adoption of those development sites. So I appreciate that that can have an impact. Hope that explained we do liaise closely with them, and once they give us the okay, then we move forward with our works and adopt the site. There are sites where the water infrastructure has been provided to a sufficient standard that we can go ahead and start the adoption process or carry out our works. And one of those would be Gallia Shore. The NI Waterworks have not been adopted or completed yet, but the works within the roads infrastructure part of that particular development have been completed, and we're going in to carry out resurfacing works in the near future on that one.
Okay. Thank you. You happy enough, Thomas? Thank you. Next, I'm going to go to Councillor Rosemary Barton.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you very much. Thank you. I've really just got this document and haven't had that much time to scan over it. But a few points. Can I just say I welcome the report and indeed the Southern Bypass making progress, and I look forward to seeing it completed eventually. However, when I was in council X years ago, I spoke about the A32. The hospital is now 20 years old. In this site, 20 years. There were a number of improvements to be made on that road. That road is still waiting certain improvements. Recently, I was spoken to by a patient, two patients, in fact, that were in Oma Hospital receiving treatment and had to be transferred by ambulance to Enniskillen Hospital for scans, x-rays, etc. And they said it was a most unpleasant journey. While I know an ambulance may not be the most comfortable of vehicles, the road certainly didn't help. The condition of the road, humps, bumps, etc. Can I ask, is there any plans to try and further the A32 in relation to making it a better road, taking out the humps and bumps, etc.? I know there you have the Cornamuck scheme, but there are other areas that need to be looked into to make the road more satisfactory for people, especially that are dependent on the Southwest Acute Hospital. That's the first thing. This second thing I noticed in glimpsing over the report that there's very limited resurfacing of roads in Erin North last year. And I see very little planned for this year. I'm not sure that our roads in Erin North are of a much higher grade or standard than elsewhere in Fermanagh or Tyrone. So can I know there are a number of roads in the area, and I haven't been out and about in the area that much of recent, but for example, roads that were asked about resurfacing several years ago, such as Coldy Road, Edenamokel Road, look at around the 30-mile limits in Ederney, for example, it's like patch the trousers. There's a patch, and there's constant repatching and repatching, and no investigation into why this repatching, no investigation into why the problem is that the road needs to be constantly looked at. So I ask that something be looked at there. Second thing, it's in respect to channels and drainage channels. How often are these inspected? And how often then are they cleaned out? Again, in local village where I live, you have grass growing out of channels in Ederney, Church Street, Ederney. That would indicate they're not being examined very often, nor cleaned out very often. So can I ask that that be looked into also? And again, I've markings down here, but Thomas has already got ahead of me in that. And the grass cutting, again, can I emphasise, around the towns and villages, that there has been very limited. And any grass cutting that did take place has been mechanic, done with a machine, which is fair enough. But there doesn't seem to be any, what I would call, hand grass cutting, such as the use of strimmers to tidy up areas. There's no such thing as that now. And I had the deterioration of the centre of white lines in the roads. And I do think, as a person that lives on the border with Fermanagh and Tyrone, if you look at Drumlish Road, there is quite a difference in the white lining in County Tyrone and the white lining in County Fermanagh when you drive along that road. So it might be something, maybe, if it could be looked at. And also on the A32, there's quite a difference in the white lining in the both counties. So if that could be looked at, and just there's defects in roads. For example, I reported defects 5 years ago in Cash. I'll be speaking to Brian at the end of the meeting to maybe, well, he wasn't working then, but with the road service, he wasn't the gentleman. I was.
Can keep it
Yes.
to general rather than specifics, and you can deal with the specifics later.
5 years, it's still not looked at. So I just think, can you do something about that, trying to have the reaction time a little bit quicker? Thank you.
Thank you, Rosemary.
Thank you.
Daniel? Yeah.
Sorry, Chair.
Yeah, go ahead, Daniel.
Okay, thank you very much. With regards to the A32, you're right, the Cornamuck scheme is the next priority on that route. The direction order, investing order has been made for that, and the procurement documents and construction documents are well advanced, and they're also being updated this year to reflect changes since they were last compiled. Due to the passage of time since the A32 improvement strategy was undertaken, which was 2006, officials in our strategic route improvements team are undertaking a review of that strategy document to make sure it aligns with the current policy, legislation, and the condition of the A32. So that may reorder some of the previously notified potential schemes, and it also may add other areas. You mentioned that there were areas that had deteriorated and become quite rolling. That's due to the substrata under the road. So that may draw those into the decision making about where the next potential investment in the A32 will be. You mentioned that there was resurfacing in Erne North and a certain lack. Brian might want to jump in at some point here, but our focus, our budget being what it is, the focus is on our roads that are worst performing, the roads which are in the worst condition and carry the most number of vehicles. So our limited funds are generally targeted to those roads, and that's a moving target because you get a bad winter and all of a sudden a road that was previously in reasonable condition becomes quite unusable and jumps up the priority list, and that obviously shoves something off the bottom of the priority list. So there may be schemes that are notified a year in advance that we were looking to carry out in a certain year, but following a reassessment of the condition of our roads in that area, it may mean that other roads take priority and that road moves off. Brian, if you want to say a few words about the North Earn area.
Yeah, Earn North along with Earn East and Earn West receive the same funding. The money that we get is divided out among the three areas. Within the roads that you've named, around that area, there was larger scale patching done. 7 Mile Straight is an example. The amount of money that was spent in the area was the same, even though it was a greater number of roads in Earn East. It was more targeted to smaller areas, smaller patching, trying to take out a greater number of defects. And some of the more main roads was carried out as well in Earn North, and that costs more given the greater area road. But most of the roads that we do, we target with defects from statistics that are coming in from inspections. So if there is any inspection whenever or any defect when the inspector's out, that'll flag it up and give us a cluster where we target our money for the remainder of the year.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you.
With regards to drainage channels, they are inspected along with the road. Our inspectors look at the roads, the verges, and the drainage of those roads. But obviously that depends on the frequency of inspections. So our inspection frequencies are up to 6 months for our lower priority roads, our U-class and some of our Cs. All depends on the number of vehicles using those roads. So there could be roads that don't get inspected for 6 months. So you could find that the drainage channels tend to be in a worse state than those ones that are inspected on a regular basis. And if the defects are identified by our inspectors, then a job card is issued to our internal or external contractors to carry out the works on drainage channels. It was mentioned also the grass cutting in towns and villages. As you know, the department's only funded for 2 grass cuts and a single swathe along those roads, but I appreciate that towns and villages, to maintain the aesthetics of and the look of those places, sometimes require additional cuts, and unfortunately we're not in a position to carry those out. What we have done in other council areas is operated a memorandum of understanding with the local councils, where they identify the areas that they're willing to take on, and the department pays for 2 cuts within those areas. And then it's up to the councils whether they use what we would often use as a vehicle with a sidearm mechanical cutter, or whether you would use a more normal, like a lawnmower or a strimmer, as you mentioned. So maybe that's something that we could examine. I think that's most of the white lines you mentioned, which we've covered, and there was a defect in cache, and if it's been there for 5 years, then I can only apologise. But if it meets our limited maintenance standards, then it should have been picked up and rectified. And if you're gonna collar Brian this evening, Councillor, then maybe remind him what particular defect that is.
Okay. Thank you, Daniel. Rosemary, thank you. Next we go to Councillor Dermot Brown.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just thanks for the team there for giving us their presentation. And I'm just going to highlight the unadopted estates. It's something that has been spoke about quite often in this chamber. And again, we've got a very bleak synopsis of the problem. You know, the problem really does seem, in this district at least, to be the historic estates, which haven't been adopted for a long, long time due to the developer going bust. And despite 20 years of knowing about the issue and many, many discussions and PAC reports and recommendations implemented, we still seem to be no further on dealing with this issue. And it seems like it's an intractable problem, that there's no light at the end of the tunnel at all. And you know, people out there who are living with this ongoing situation and are being financially burdened by it. It's no laughing matter for people out there who want this sorted out and who are asking the questions, what do we do? What can the department do? But there just seems to be a shrug of the shoulders attitude. This is a problem that we just have and we have to deal with it. So in terms of trying to get a more positive spin on this and trying to figure out where do we go from here, one of the things that Daniel mentioned was that if you were to really deal with this issue, you'd have to bring in some sort of a legislative arrangement whereby developers would have an obligation to step in and to upkeep the estates. But we've received correspondence earlier this year which said the department wasn't going to consider any legislative solution to this. So my question really is, apart from a legislative solution or maybe a large pot of money coming that will solve all these problems, what is the actual solution that the department and the roads service is going to provide to people? People need to know what is the light at the end of the tunnel. People need to have hope that this problem can be solved. So if you can shed some light and maybe give some hope tonight so we can go away feeling that this issue isn't intractable and there is a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that some of the councillors that are here a lot longer than me have heard this consistently, and I'm sure it predates Daniel here, but I'm going to let Daniel speak about it briefly, but it does predate even you, Daniel.
It does. In fact, there's some that I'm aware of that have been an issue longer than I've been in DfI roads, and that's 24 years. No, I appreciate for people who are in that situation, especially the long-term ones, that it is a very difficult situation to be in because it affects their ability to sell their houses in some cases. The problem with any changes to legislation is you can't backdate it, if you know what I'm saying. Changes to legislation would need to be enforceable from the date the legislation becomes active. So it can deal with future issues or issues that we anticipate in the future, but not necessarily with especially those long-term issues. I know there are some development sites where the residents have taken it into their hands and reluctantly, I'm sure, put money towards making up the shortfall between the bond and the works necessary to carry out the works. At the minute, that's probably the most, I'm not going to say effective, because some people just don't have that money to spend, especially with the times that we're in at the minute. But at the minute, that's probably the most realistic method of getting these backlog sites adopted. If we did have money set aside within the department, that would allow us to move forward. But as I say, everything's safety focused at the minute, and this particular issue is difficult and as upsetting as it is for a lot of people, it's not ultimately at this stage a safety issue. And if it becomes a safety issue, then the department has an obligation to step in. So if there's any safety issues within a site, then we will step in and rectify the safety issue, but we can't step in and carry out all the works necessary to bring it up to an adoptable standard. We just don't have the budget for it, I'm afraid. And I appreciate that's probably not what Councillor Brown wishes to hear, but at this stage, unless money is allocated from the Assembly to address this particular issue, then I'm afraid I can't offer a solution. It's not within my gift to offer a solution.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Next, we'll go to Councillor Seamus Green.
Thank you, Chair. And thanks for the report. I do realise it's not an easy job. It never has been an easy job to try and do work where the funding isn't available for it. I suppose ask any farmer and they'll tell you the same thing. They'll be trying to produce meat and crops and everything and not getting enough money to do it. So I'll go on to, I suppose, what I've picked out of this report. I find it quite hard to follow, because for some reason this year there's only the names of roads in a lot of the places, and as I only really know the roads in Ayr and East, I don't know where the rest of the roads are, so I'm struggling to find out or to follow where they are. So I'll just go through my problem with it. And I suppose just to follow on to that, it also doesn't say how much resurfacing was done on each road. So given a road that was resurfacing done, we have no idea. It could have been a foot, it could have been a kilometre, it could have been 10 metres, we don't know. So it's very hard to follow that. So I would hope that maybe in future the road and what the village is or town it's near could also be provided. So taking that, I suppose I'll go through to give the examples of what I mean. Carriageway and minor works, there's 25 of them. 2 of them were in the Ayr and East area. We move on then to what do we see now? Yeah, road markings, signs and bollards. There's 14 of them, 1 in the Ayr and East area. There's no prices for any of them. You know, we don't know what was spent at any of them, you know, to compare. Go on ahead then to street lighting. There's 21 things of street lighting. I can only see 1 in Ayr and East. We go on then to structural locations, I think it is. There's 51 of them and 6 in Ayr and East. We go on then to, which is the most disturbing one, I suppose, resurfacing of trunk roads. There's 8 of them, none in Ayr and East. Then we'll go on to resurfacing. There's 149 of them, of which 7 of them is in Ayr and East. Now that 7 might have been 2 kilometres long each, but I haven't come across them, so I'm just struggling to see where the money was spent evenly on that. So I'll repeat that one again. I can find 7 roads in Ayr and East, and there's 140 roads that's been resurfaced, but we don't know what lengths they are, and I have no idea where them roads are, apart from the fact that they're not in Ayr and East. Then we go on to drainage. 44 of them, 4 in Ayr and East. And so I don't know whether you have got me point in that. I don't know whether it was equal for Ayr and East, but on the numbers that was done, it doesn't seem very equal. But the fact that there's no distances, there's no lengths, there's no prices, it's very hard to see anything other than Ayr and East got a very bad deal.
Okay.
Okay.
You want to come in there, Daniel? Yeah.
Yeah. The reason that the council reports changed in the last number of years is the move by the department to make it consistent across all divisions. In the past, we would have provided some of that information that you were talking about. We can certainly look to provide additional information with regards to locations in the future, certainly. I would say that the funding that we do get is directed at those areas that are most in need. So other than to say that Ayr and East in this current year perhaps didn't receive as much work as in previous years or in future years, because it depends entirely on the funds being directed to those areas which are most in need. Is there anything that you'd like to add, Brian?
Yes, Daniel, Aaron East, the same as Aaron North and Aaron West, received the same funding for resurfacing with the last 2-3 years. Just because the size or the number of roads varied didn't mean that the money that was spent in each of them areas wasn't targeted to the areas with greatest defects.
Thank you.
I'm going to try and bring you back in again, Seamus.
No, thanks, Daniel. And I suppose 2 years ago, you might remember the fact that I pointed out that there was no work resurfacing done in Fermanagh for 2 years. Whatsoever, none, no resurfacing. So to say that, you know, that Fermanagh has been getting its fair share, I don't know. Aaron East certainly got no work done for 2 years. They've got 7 projects out of 149 this year. And you see, the point I'm making is I don't know whether that equates to the same amount of resurfacing work, because it doesn't say, you know, and it doesn't say where the other roads are, so I can't compare. So that's the problem I'm having.
Thank you, Seamus. I can certainly provide you with the breakdown of funding across the different areas within Fermanagh and Omagh, and that will perhaps ease your mind with regards to the funding that's spent in the different areas.
Thank you, Daniel. Anthony, Councillor Anthony Feely.
Yeah, thanks, Chair, and thanks for the presentation, man. And I must admit, I didn't go into this as much detail as Seamus, so I don't know how many roads in West was done, but I'd hope to think there was a bit more than that. And I think that'd be useful if Daniel would give us that information on each electrical area, what was the spend was. And I know we had a good meeting during the week of Brian there about the issues, so I'm not going to go into the local issues, but I just want to mention 1 or 2 things that I think would be very important coming up to the winter, is the cleaning of the gullies and the putting out the grit pails. And Brian did assure me that they would be done, especially on one of the roads. It was very steep. The water's flowing down the road, and if it freezes on, it's going to be like a skating rink. And it's one of the roads that doesn't be gritted, so we need extra grit there. There's 2 bus drivers living on it, so I just wanted to mention that again to make sure it is done before the winter. For we're getting close to that now. And Thomas brought up about the road markings, and he was assured that the road marking would be done at a few dangerous junctions in Garrison as well, and also up in Bow. So that's not too bad. So I just wanted to mention that again. And I do welcome the work going to be done on the A5 and the potential work on the Inniskillen bypass, but maybe I missed it as well. It was just disappointing that there's no mention of the A4, another fairly busy road, and especially from Inniskillen to Bellicue. And I know there's a lot of money being spent on the same road when you cross the border there from Sligo to Manahampton. I feel we've been left behind. So I'd just like a comment from Daniel maybe about the A4. And just like to say, I know you're doing your best with a tight budget and you're keeping the potholes as fixed as well as you can for tight budget. So well done on the work that's been done so far. So just them couple of comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Anthony.
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the gunny cleaning and grit piles, I mean, this time of the year is the time of year where the leaves do tend to get washed down them. So there is a focus from the teams on the ground that the gully cleaning needs to be carried out. And if there are any areas that are identified as being particular problem areas, then we'll try and get around them, even if it means a second clean, especially if it's causing ponding on the roads and causing a safety hazard. The grit piles, as far as I'm aware, and Brian O'Connor may come in on this, the grit piles are currently being distributed.
They were working now to get them out. We've brought in a contractor this year to get them out that bit quicker. The grit pile or the grit bins are currently being filled, if not all filled, and the grit piles hopefully will be starting next week, if not the week after.
Okay. Thanks, Brian.
Okay, thank you.
Sorry, just to capture the point on the A4 there, Chair, sorry. That particular section of the A4 isn't currently on the major works programme for improvement. What I would say that with the emerging transport strategy that's coming out now, that'll be followed by the Fermanagh transport plan, and that in turn will be followed by the RSTNTP, the updated RSTNP. Sorry. Sorry, this is the reason I had to stay at home today and I couldn't attend. My daughter's coming. Hold on 1 second, please.
Okay.
I'm very sorry. With regards to the with regards to the A4, as I say, it's not currently on the major works programme list, the short list of major schemes that we'll be taking forward or significant schemes that we'll be taking forward, whereas the A32 Cornmuck is. My suggestion would be for the council to engage fully with the area plan consultations and the derivation of the RSTNTP if there's a particular scheme or bypass or something like that that the council areas would like to see included in that, because that will inform our future works programme.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you, Daniel. Okay, so a wee bit of housekeeping here. I'd neglected to note the councillors online, but I did make a note, and I'm going to take Councillor Eddie Roof in the chamber, and after that I will take Councillor Debbie Coyle, Josephine Dehan, Glenn Campbell and Robert Irvine, and then I will be coming back to Councillor Barry McElduff in the chamber. So if anybody else is going to indicate that's the order you are down the packing line, it's a bit like the passport office, you're getting a number. So Councillor Eddie Roof.
Chair, and thanks to the team for the presentation. Again, can I echo what's been said? I do appreciate the difficulty in the task you have to do with the budget that you receive to do it. There's one point that will be specialised to my area, but there is a second point that I think will probably be reflective across a number. My area of particular concern is the, as it has been discussed previously, is the Temple Road outside the newly built Devonish College. It's still a 50-mile-an-hour road there. The risk to the pupils there, I appreciate there are plans in place and things like that with the principal. They're not supposed to cross the road, etc., but there's very few occasions when a 16-year-old will listen to a principal. So there's a shop across the road, and the reality is they are crossing there, and that is the reality. There's a substantial number of houses going to be built there over the next kind of 5 to 10 years. So I would anticipate that at some point in the next 5 to 10 years, the decision will be made to reduce the speed limit from 50 there, possibly down to 40 or even less. I would ask that it gets done much sooner, because if it's going to be done anyway, as I expect it to be, I feel it should be done before someone actually gets hurt, and that's my fear of that particular junction at the moment. The second point I have is just on communication of road works that are ongoing in the area. Sometimes there's quite a bit, of work happening in a very localized area, and occasionally it'll be week 1 in this email, week 2 in this email, and it's very difficult to keep track of things. So if there's any updates that extends work from 1 week to 2 weeks, for example, or extends the area, if it could be republished as a whole rather than as a separate work, it just makes it easier for us to put that across to the public. And I've also been approached by a number of business owners who deal with kind of logistics and transport, and they would like to be added to the email chain essentially for those notifications. So if we could be made aware of where best to send them so that they can be added to that, just so that they can better deal with kind of live situations and manage their workload. Thank you.
Thank you, Eddie.
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to the Temple Road, there has been significant lobbying from the school and local representatives with regards to a reduction in the speed limit there. Any decisions that we made has to be based on the policy that governs speed limit reductions or setting of speed limits, and any decision takes into account the anxiety of local residents and councillors. We are due to carry out an updated traffic assessment on the Tempo Road in the coming weeks. We were trying to get out there recently, but as our team was out trying to place the counters, there was an accident, so they couldn't place the counters on that day. They're due to go out again in the near future, and that'll give us additional information following the installation of the recent pedestrian island on the Tempo Road, which will inform any future decision, and that decision has to be made with the input of the PSNI, who are going to be the body that needs to enforce any new speed limit. As you say, as areas become more developed, there's more cars, more turning movements, more reason to reduce the speed limit. So we'll certainly try to take into account the ongoing developments that are committed within that area when making that decision. Communication of roadworks. Traffic Watch NI are currently looking at automating the traffic regulation, the temporary traffic regulation orders, for them all to be included on Traffic Watch NI, the website. At the minute, we only put on significant roadworks in Western Division. In some areas, they have the capacity to put on additional. They don't capture all of them, but we are certainly exploring ways of communicating even the smaller scale roadworks and to the wider public, and that's one of the avenues that we're going down at the minute. Sorry, did you want to say something, Brian?
I did, Daniel. I think what Eddie's talking about, the TCPs are automatically sent out. So once we approve a road closure or a lane closure, them emails are automatically now sent out in the new system. They've probably increased tenfold from what you would have been getting before because we bunched them together. So now, week on week, you're getting more of them. As far as the businesses go, if you send in the list or their email address, we can get them added on and then send that out additionally to someone else.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, so next, go to Councillor Debbie Coyle online.
Thanks, Chair. First, I just wanted to give apologies for Councillor Colette McNulty. Colette had sent apologies from Monday, but since then her mother-in-law has passed away, and I believe the funeral was today. And so I just want to send our condolences and our thoughts to Colette and her husband and family. And since coming on to the meeting, I've also received apologies from Councillor Oisin Gallagher as well. If those can be recorded, please, because I should have gave Colette's earlier. And I'm not going to repeat anything. I had a list of things very similar. I definitely want to support what Seamus said about the list of roads. And the reason is well, for me, it's not about keeping tabs on where you're doing work, Daniel. It's just that when you're out canvassing or when you're out chatting people, doing a wee leaflet drop or something like that, or people contact the office, you can say, or like we can say, well, there was work done here or there was work done there. And, you know, you can have a conversation about it. But like Seamus, I would know some of the roads and I would have no idea whether. So for me, it's like, it's important to share those things with our constituents. I did attend I was the only Erne North councillor to attend the Erne North DEA meeting the other day. So I had a good conversation with Stuart and his name, Brian, and in particular around issues in the Irvinstown area and different issues there. So that was very informative. The only thing that I really, because I'm not going to bring up anything that everybody else has brought up tonight about road markings and all that, you know, that was on my list as well. I do welcome the report. The only thing that I didn't ask at my DEA meeting, and if I can just ask about the disabled spot in particular outside St Paul's, it says in the report that that's ongoing, and I know the principal of the school would have, contacted us maybe back in June time, May or June, and was hoping that that would be done, because of the child that needed it to be able to get to school or, park. So I'm just wondering, how long does it take to complete something like a disabled spot, especially if it's outside a school, or even somebody's house, because the ones that are on that list, I was just surprised to see, and I didn't bring it up at the DEA meeting because I just guessed, wrong obviously, that it was done in time for school. But is there any idea when? That's the only question I'm going to ask, because I just want to, and just really about the roads, if we can have, a map or blocked into areas of where it is, that would be really helpful, especially when people are coming in and raising concerns, that we can say, well, you did do it or you didn't do it. But, we know that you're doing, your best with limited resources and money. So, sometimes it's good to tell people, what you are doing as well, as just complaining about stuff that you're not. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Daniel, before I go to you, I think you want to come in first there, Brian?
Yeah, Debbie, I'll speak with traffic section regarding that disabled way. It hasn't come down our length yet to get done, but most of the children in the school are directed to the car park, so there shouldn't be an issue with the car pulling up and parking outside the grounds of the school.
Yeah, and what I would say is it requires legislation to be enforceable, disabled bays or any parking restrictions. And at the minute, there's a very long process because we have to consult with the local community, seek whether there's any objections, or notify, consult, deal with any objections, seek to proceed despite the objections, and then for the legislation to be processed by legislation branch within headquarters. And that process, the overall process, it seems quite simple, but to follow each and the timeframes for each are set down in legislation and within our policy. So there's the time frame for a consultation is 28 days or a number of weeks. So to get through it, it can take anything up to 6 to 8 months. So it may be that the legislation, we've gone through the process and it's sitting to be legislated at this point, which is why we haven't. It's got ongoing on the council report. So I can certainly chase that one up and try and give it a move along if it is in that process.
Yeah, okay, thank you. And I think the car park is on the other side of the road, and I'm guessing it's for a child that, the closer they are to the school, the better it is for them. So thanks for that. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Debbie. Next, go to Councillor Josephine Deacon, also online.
Thank you, Chair. And at the outset, I want to thank Councillor Debbie Coyle for her update regarding Councillor Colette McNulty. And I too would like to express my condolences to her and her husband Kieran and family. Very sad news indeed. I too would like to express my congratulations to Councillor Mark Ovens and Mrs. Ovens on their new arrival and wish them well in that. And also to welcome Rosemary back to the Chamber and wish her well in her work in the years ahead. So welcome to Daniel and colleagues, and thank you for giving us your time this evening. Chair, other members have said Daniel has brought us good news and bad news. And the good news is the update on the A5 Western Transport Corridor and the Enniskillen bypass. And I won't rehearse the issues relating to the A32, but I want to support Rosemary in her comments, Councillor Barton, and just to note that Daniel has assured us that the works on the A32 will be given priority status, and that is fitting because those upgrades have been in the pipeline for a very long time. And, you know, our constituents rely on that road so much for moving quickly and safely from Omagh and District to the Southwest Acute Hospital. So that's good news indeed. I want to share the disappointment of other members who have mentioned the difficulties, the financial difficulties and lack of progress on unapproved estates has caused a lot of suffering to our constituents. I do appreciate that when money is tight, health and safety issues must take priority. But the message I would like you to take back this evening is just how seriously this council takes that issue for the very reason that I have given. Chair, in contrast to Councillor O'Reilly, I have to say I do find the DEA meetings very good, perhaps not so productive because of the funding constraints that we're constantly reminded of. But we had a very good meeting recently with Neil, Tracy and Connor, so thank you for that. I wanted to mention in particular the information we were given at that meeting regarding a 35% vacancy rate in staff in the Western Division. And Chair, that concerns me very greatly. And we just wonder what priority is being given to replace recruitment and replacing those staff, because sometimes we wonder if there are enough staff members there actually to complete the work that has to be done, particularly as winter approaches, the winter gritting schedule and all of that. So I won't rehearse other areas that other members have covered, Chair, but if Daniel could make a comment on that, I would appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you, Josephine. Daniel?
Thank you, Councillor. With regards to, just very quickly, and it's something that I think sometimes is lost, the responsibility for providing the infrastructure in all new developments is down to the developer. It's really the insurance policy where we need to step in. Looking back over the history, it's the vast majority, 94, 95% of development sites go through without particular issues, and they don't join the adoption backlog. It's just that 5 to 6% that do, and where we can step in, we do with enforcement action. But I appreciate that historically, sometimes that may not have been possible, and that's sort of reflected in the older estates being the ones that are on the backlog, and very few are being added, if any. Certainly the one in the last 3 years, we would still be hopeful that that one will be resolved and it won't join the long list or the priority one list. With regards to the vacancy rates, you're absolutely right. It's been a difficulty for the department as a whole over the last number of years to get new staff in, and the reason for that being that the private sector is able to react to highs and lows in the number of available engineers. So in other words, they can offer better money and better prospects than the department can at the moment. Now, that's obviously a flip from 2008 when we were able to get staff in relatively easy because of the difficulties in the private sector. So, but there are staff recruitment going on in the background. Recently, the department took on 20 new technical staff from a skills academy. So young people coming straight from school to be educated as engineers within the department. And there's another 17 who are in the process of going through the same skills academy. We also have 2 external competitions to run later this year at HPTO and principal grade. And there are plans to bring in further competitions. And we're also taking on additional graduates and apprentice trainees straight from school as well. So there are a number of initiatives being used at the minute to increase our staff structure. But as I say, getting people in is the challenge that we're faced with at the minute. And a lot of times it's people who have a certain amount of civic duty, who want to do work for the department to improve the infrastructure for communities that we're getting in at the minute. And unfortunately, there's not many of them. But yeah, it is a recognised issue. With regards to winter service, we have a full winter service planned here in the Rest, and we are currently staffed to do so. And that does take into account a couple of people from an external company to drive some of the gritters. But at the minute, we have a full roster and we carry out a full winter service in Western Division.
Okay. Thank you,
Chair,
Daniel.
Chair, if I could just make one comment. Thank you, Daniel, for that update, and that's reassuring. And I'm very glad to hear that DfI Roads have a recruitment campaign underway, and it's good to see school leavers being given the opportunity to train up whilst in employment. But what I would say is this, that DfI need to be able to compete with other organisations for senior engineers with a lot of experience behind them, particularly in the area of project management. You know, this is important work. You know, our whole infrastructure development going forward depends on having the highest caliber of dedicated and experienced workforce. So perhaps that is something that you could flag up to the department and to the minister, that needs to be looked at again. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Josephine. Next we go to Councillor Glenn Campbell.
Thank you, Chairman, and thanks to Daniel and also to Conor and Brian. And I suppose I don't want to rehash anything that's been said, but really just a thought on the issue of road safety. Something I've raised previously is the amount of verges that seem to be given way on roads. Now, I know that we can point to heavier agricultural vehicles as an example of something that's changed, you know, but certainly there's a lot of cases of rows of cones along the side of the road and markings of various sorts, and that's just sitting there. And I see those as a priority in terms of road safety, because there's sizable drops there, whether it's the Moyla Road or Dunbiggin, or there's different roads there, and I could list Chinera and different roads, and Cork Hill Road famously has been on my agenda for a while, so in terms of that, is that considered a road safety issue? I suppose that's my question, and can those be prioritized? I of course support the comments in respect of the A5, and that's to be welcomed, the progress there, and the A32 needs to be pushed on also. And I also appreciate, Daniel, the constraints that you're under financially, and the monitoring rounds are going to be important, and I know that Road Service have availed of funding, so there is hope there. And I wish the department, I wish Road Service well with that. But just in respect of that road safety issue, I mean, I think we're all disappointed in terms of the amount of work that's not been done in the various DAs, but certainly that's an example of a road safety issue I feel that needs to be looked at across the district. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Glenn. Daniel?
Thank you, Councillor. You're right, that would definitely be a safety issue. Certainly if it's an uncontrolled failure of the verge of a road. Quite often the heavier rainfall events that we're getting these days tend to scour out over the edge drainage on some of our rural roads, and that weakens the embankment, causing potential failure. Now, each site will have their own particular failure mechanism and the reasons for it and contributing factors. But I would see that the drainage issue that was brought up earlier would be a contributory factor to some of that. And the repair of those would be a safety issue. And we would like to move them on as quickly as we can. But if following the assessment, the road is stable and the cones are able to be left there and it's not causing a further safety issue, then we need that time to carry out a proper and considered design for repair of it, to make sure that we don't just move the issue down the road, or we carry out an inappropriate repair that becomes a problem in the future. So you mentioned a number of them there, and I don't know
Can
whether...
I jump in here, Daniel?
Yes, that's what I was just going to ask. Thanks,
Yeah,
Tom.
no, there is a couple of cases where vehicles have left the road. I know, about the outside Bertha towards the A5, vehicles do leave the roads, and in cases like that, we do contact the landowners because it is their verge or their hedge at the end of the day. So we start off discussions with the landowners. Are they aware of how the incident took place? And so the first point of call is the person responsible that went through the hedge and goes through the insurances. So the one outside Bear there towards the A5, we have been speaking to the landowner on that one in particular. It is going through insurances. There's one on the Tatty Road again. It was a Henderson's lorry. It's going through the insurances. And so that is our first point of call. If we make no headway on it, we then do step in and try and recuperate the costs afterwards. We just don't jump in initially, because at the end of the day, the money we do spend will be taken from a pot where it will do other essential of our maintenance work. So that's the process we normally take there. It may take a while, but that's the process we take.
Thank you, Conor.
Thank you, Chairman.
Happy enough there, Glenn?
I thank you, Chairman. No, I can appreciate that would be maybe the first protocol, but certainly there's just a lot of these appearing across the district, that's for sure. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Glenn. Next we go to Councillor Robert Irvine.
Thank you very much, Chair. I thought I was going to go to sleep, but I've woken up again. Thank you. First of all, I'm not going to go through the litany that all the other councillors have done. I accept that. I just am in agreement with the majority of what's said. Generally speaking, I find my interventions with the department through our offices of our MLA have been very good, very effective, and we've got some very good solutions locally and on a broader scale for constituents where funding is available. Thanks very much. A general point, Daniel, I've had interventions that are repeated interventions, and I'm just saying this generally in regard to potholes, and they actually come apart after 3 to 6 months, and it's obviously a structural issue. But the problem seems to be that you have a revenue stream available, but you don't necessarily have a minor capital works available to actually tackle the root of the problem. And I just wonder, have you an algorithm, for want of a better word, or a series of criteria? When does one step over into out of revenue into capital and actually try to solve the issue for the next 15 to 20, 25 years? I would ask, if you haven't got that you would actually look at it and move it back up the department chain and say we're coming to a stage where we need structural intervention before the actual fabric of a road deteriorates completely and it becomes a major intervention. That's one issue. I take your point about the A4 as well. I think through the local development plan, we will have to come back into that. I want to come in basically on the estates roads and just finish off this comment. We've had a huge amount of discussion over the past probably 2 years in regard to the historic backlog. And I appreciate that the more modern estates coming up now in the past sort of 3 to 5, maybe 6 years are better managed in regard to the appropriateness of the bond in place and probably the fiduciary interest with regard to the developers, longevity and everything like that, and you're not creating a problem. But we as a unit see the problem of the older ones. They are being kicked around from pillar to post. We have talked to you as divisional representatives of DfI. We've lobbied the minister. And essentially what we as a council have got back is the statutory statement coming obviously from the department through to the minister back to us as to what the legislative requirement is at the moment. And it's basically, if there isn't sufficient money there, you can't do anything. Now, we appreciate that, but the problem is that's not really an option if we are leaving unadopted roads for another 10 or 15 years. You're leaving constituents throughout Northern Ireland in basically a black hole that's just getting worse. What we've tried to say as a council, and I personally believe it, I think the department, that's you, to the minister, should be more proactive in actually bringing forward solutions to try and eradicate this problem. What you've done at the moment is identify the problem, and in the short term moving forward, you've tried to actually solve the problem, and it would appear that you have solved the problem by actually linking the bond tabulation to sort of a retail index. So in actual fact, it makes it more relevant to the actual work that has to be done when you're moving in. What we would like to see is a raft of options coming forward to actually try and resolve the backtail, because the backtail is not going away, and it's actually getting longer and getting worse. And you're leaving people basically in a problem. Now, you've mentioned that some groups have actually taken it in their own hands, raised the finance themselves, and moved forward. What I'm suggesting is that should be a possible option to be put on the table. Now, to do it properly, I think the department has to take a lead, the minister has to take a lead in an issue like that, and actually table legislation that would allow the department to enable a group of residents to be able to undertake the work to a satisfactory standard, either with the aid of department money on a short-term loan that would be paid back over a period of time, or you would have enabling legislation as well, where you could let a group of residents actually avail of project management, construction services, but they pay for the work themselves. In other words, a raft of options to actually enable people to actually tackle the problem, because what you're doing is there's a void out there. People want to get it done, whether it's by 100% public money as the intervention, whether it's part public, part private, or whether it's 100% private. But the problem is it has to be brought up to the relevant standard. It has to be done properly. And you and Northern Ireland Water have the expertise to actually enable a contract and bring it up to the standard. What I would suggest is you as a department need to go to the minister and say, this is a problem. In the short term, we have stopped the problem becoming any bigger by moving forward, but we still have the historic, and we've actually got to tidy the historic up. Here's 5 or 6 solutions basically that people could avail of. Obviously, the creme de la creme is we'll get public money and we'll do it ourselves. And you go down to the lowest form is we will have some form of operation that people can tap into. They can do it themselves, but we will oversee it and make sure it's up to the standard, and we'll adopt it automatically. And we'll adopt it because
You can start winding up there, Robert.
Yeah, that's it. Okay, thanks.
Okay, thank you. Daniel, quickly.
Thank you, Councillor. Yeah, the repeated pothole interventions, there is work ongoing at the minute to use AI or at least an algorithm within our scanner and pothole identification software that'll look at areas that will prioritize or maximize our resources in large scale patching. So rather than having a small patch and a small patch and a small patch, it'll look at it and identify those using the information from our scanners, our deflectographs, our inspections, and identify those areas that would most benefit, be the best targeted money for large capital-based interventions rather than resource ones. So we would continue to do the resource interventions on individual potholes, but if it looks at it and it ticks a lot of the boxes that would move it towards a capital, then it will identify that area and basically cost it out for us. So there is work in the background to progress that line of thought that you mentioned there. Implementation, I would think probably we would start to look at a pilot. I'd need to speak to my colleagues in headquarters in digital services, but the presentation I saw earlier this year, they were already looking at pilot areas to put that to the test. So it's hopefully coming. With regards to options for the minister to examine, certainly the lower end one that you mentioned there, we have used that one where we used the bond. We received money from the people in the development, and then we carried out the works using our term contractor, and we supervise it. And once we do that, it's automatically adopted after 1 year. So it's automatically adopted if we carry out the work. If somebody else carries out the work, there's a year's probation essentially for the site to make sure no further defects come up. But if we carry out, it's automatically adopted. So we already have that option, and we have repaired some developments using that option. But I thought that was an interesting suggestion that was made there, and it's not one I have heard before, is that a loan is provided to allow that work to go ahead, and that loan is repaid. So that's certainly something, that's food for thought, and it's something that I would be willing to include in any paper that would go to the minister. So thank you for that.
Okay, thank you, Daniel. Okay, Robert?
Yes, John, thank you very much. And thank you, Daniel. Happy to talk further about that if you want to. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so next we have back to Councillor Barry McElduff in the chamber.
Okay, thanks very much, Chair. First of all, I would make a positive point that I do find the section engineer's office and the divisional roads manager's office responsive, very responsive administratively, and following up on things, you know, that you're asking them to do. And I suppose the nature of this, we don't enough say thank you for the good work done. You know, like local to me, very local to me, I'm conscious that in the last week there was a very good DfI response to a potential flooding situation as part of phoning the flooding incident line, and as well as that, good resurfacing work, you know, near where I personally live. So it's, you know, there's a lot of positives, but we get it in the neck from constituents, you know, the work that is not being prioritised, the work that they don't see being done. And people aren't maybe thankful enough for the work that is done. And I do appreciate it's a limited budget. But one that I'm aghast at not being completed. And I would imagine Connor will be able to say that it's again the contractor not available or something like that. It's an issue that surfaced in today's Ulster Herald newspaper. It's the taxi rank in Omagh. Taxi rank, it's done. Good. That's great. Thank God for that. We can take a moment out now and reflect on that. But that was an absolute priority. I suppose there's another development situation in Omagh, and it would be, I won't go into the specifics of it, but it's about work that's about to happen in the Dromore Road area of Omagh. And I know the business community have been lobbying for some changes to times of work and stuff to minimise trading loss. You know, I wonder would Connor be in a position to comment on that?
Yeah, Barry, I don't think there's any issues there at the moment. It is a substantial scheme that we're planning in Omagh. It's about a £800,000 scheme we're planning doing. Our first stretch is on the A32 James Street Railway link. I don't know if you're aware of it, but we did hold a consultation in the County Hall a few weeks ago course, the contractor wants as much hours as he can to get his work done and not through the night. So we initially started off, we were planning on 8 o'clock to 6 o'clock in the morning. We spoke to the business, they weren't content with that. So I went back to the businesses then last week and agreed that we'll not start works now until the 10 o'clock along the front of all those properties. There's a small section in GMC, but it's up by Loretto, where it's not affecting the business, where we said, look, we're going to come in there at 8 o'clock. That's to get the plant mobilised, the site, to make a start. But no access will be restricted to your Lidl, to your classic service station, the coach. They will have full access until the 10 o'clock, and positive responses from some of them that they are content. So I think that issue is resolved.
I'm very grateful for that. That's very, very helpful. I was keeping in touch with the businesses just, and I'm delighted to hear that there's a resolution there. Final point would be, obviously I want to make general points like I would like to see any road where there is a school located, that to be included on the gritting schedule. Would like that. That's a high level point to make. It's not something I'm going to get an answer till now. But where there's a school, it would be brilliant if it was included on the gritting schedule.
All rural schools in Fermanagh, Omagh East is included on the gritting schedule from last year, the later end of last year, that we got them added onto it.
Thank you. The solutions are coming flying here, hot and fast, which is what we want. And finally, the staffing issues. I'm aware from speaking to some people who work in other government departments, and they've engineering experience, and they would like a transfer across to DfI roads. I've heard that. Is it easy to make that type of transfer inside the civil service setting? If somebody wants to join DfI roads of an engineer experience, how do they go about it?
I think Daniel's coming in on that.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, Councillor McElduff, if they have a transfer request in from their current department, it could be facilitated that way. Otherwise, they would need to basically apply to one of the new SIFTs or one of the new advertisements for jobs within the department, and come in that way. One thing I would say is that if they're currently in a HPTO and there's a HPTO competition, if they have a transfer request in, then there's the possibility that would facilitate the move, regardless of whether they're applying to the new competition, because transfers get precedent before people are placed from a competition. So there are mechanisms for people to move across departments.
Thank you. Thanks very much.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Thank you very much, Daniel, Brian and Connor, for giving us forthright answers here. I don't think you've tried to avoid anything. And also, I'm very encouraged that the councillors managed to behave themselves, and I know some were very creative in getting their local issues into their comments and questions, but for the greater part you have. We have one piece of correspondence which is urgent, and John is going to bring that to us now.
Thank you, Chair. Members, you'll recall that at the council meeting on the 1st of October, members had noted the disappointment that there was no county Tyrone venue included in the consultation for the draft programme for government, and it urged that we would write to the programme for government team seeking for some future engagement. So they have come back to us on Tuesday of this week and have outlined a number of dates, and the Chief Executive, in consultation with the Chair, has identified a fair date of 2 o'clock on Tuesday, the 29th of October. So that meeting will be held virtually via Teams, and Democratic Services will be getting the invitation out as soon as possible.
Does that need noting, John?
Yeah, just the note.
So somebody proposed by proposing, and Eddie seconded. Thank you very much. I've not been notified of any other business. Nobody has contacted me, so unless I'm a mind reader, it's not coming to me at this stage. So thank you very much, and again, thank you everybody, and safe home. Good night.
Thank you.